free speech is important. But again, you do not have the right. You do not have any right in this country to utilize your speech in a way that is antagonistic, that leads violence against another. The courts have been clear on this. And Harvard, producing some really talented attorneys, you would think, Michelle, would probably know that better than anybody else.
Maybe you've seen Shermichael Singleton on CNN. Maybe not. You're going to enjoy this. I get to call him a young man because he's only 34. He is the co-founder and co-owner of Guns Out TV, big time Second Amendment supporter. He's got a lot to say, and we discuss it all. Before we move on, please hit that subscribe button. Just click it, whether you're on YouTube or Rumble, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Just click subscribe so you never miss an episode. You never know who we're going to have on. We have some just great guests coming up, and Shermichael Singleton is one of them. He is next. Hey, Shermichael, it is great to finally meet you. This is a true pleasure. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's an honor to be on the show. I mean, I followed your work for a long, long time. And so when you reached out, I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to do this. I didn't even have to think about it.
I appreciate that. We have a lot to talk about. And one of the ways I prep for these is I look at someone's Twitter page, X page, because I like to see what you're posting, what interests you.
Yeah.
So let's start with Harvard. There's a lot going on at Harvard, and we've seen it with our own eyes. We've heard about studies. Students have talked about how they're mistreated there if they're Jewish. We've seen the protests. We've seen the former president of Harvard sit in front of Congress and say, well, it depends on the context if we're calling for the intifada. What do you think about the Trump administration's approach to Harvard in general? Is it fair?
I think it's fair, and Harvard could easily clean this up. Columbia was in the same place several months ago. And if you recall, Columbia took the necessary steps to not be in the administration's crosshairs as it pertains to doing a better job in terms of the facilitation of protecting Jewish students. Look, we're conservatives here. We absolutely believe in the First Amendment right. But the First Amendment has limitations, and the Supreme Court has ruled on this in the past. You can't use your words to cause violence that could lead to violence against individuals. And that's what we're seeing across these college campuses. Michelle, last year, Penny Nance, Concerned Women for America, reached out to me and wanted me to do a focus group with some Jewish students from across the country. And I had some from Columbia, and believe it or not, I had several from Harvard. And some of the things that those Jewish students told me last year during the facilitation of that focus group study, it was hurtful. It was unbelievable. You had one student who was instructed by a professor to write about the quote unquote genocide against the Palestinians by the Jewish people. And when she informed the professor that her grandparents were Holocaust survivors, she was not comfortable with that. That was not the truth as she saw it. The professor told her, well, your truth is not correct. That's what the professor told her.
Your truth.
And so, right. Your truth, my truth. There's no, it's all subjective, I suppose, these days. But what we're seeing and what these Jewish students are experiencing on college campuses is really unheard. We just typically see the protest. There was another Jewish student who's attending an institution in Virginia. And she told me she was leaving her locker room, I believe, or leaving her dorm room. And she had a Jewish flag in her hand. She was going to a Hillel meeting, I believe. And there were some protesters. Someone walked up to her, approached her and said, you're a dirty Jew, spat in her face. And she ran off crying. She informed the administration at this particular institution. They did absolutely nothing. I can go on and on about the incidents. And I'll just tell you this one before I answer the overall question about the Trump administration's position on this. There was another student. This student actually is a student at Harvard. He's a grad student. And he said to me during the focus group, he said, Shermichael, I'm not a conservative guy. I'm pretty liberal, as a lot of American Jews do typically vote for Democrats. You know this to be the case as well. And he said, I stood with Black Lives Matter protesters. I stood with the Women's March protesters. He said, Shermichael, none of my friends are standing with me. That's how I surmise this. No one's standing with them.
Well, you
And so
know,
this is
I'll tell you one of my reactions to the recent shooting of that young couple at the museum in DC, the Jewish museum in DC. You didn't hear all the gun rights activists coming out after that shooting.
nope,
You didn't hear anyone saying, see if they, they shouldn't have had a gun.
nope.
So it's the selective outrage of people. It doesn't seem to be applied evenly or fairly.
Oh, not at all, not at all. And so to answer your question, I do think the administration is doing the right thing of protecting Jewish students. They're a small minority, and many of them, some of my closest friends are Jewish. I lost my father at a very, very young age when I was growing up in New Orleans. And the Jewish Museum Community Center at the time when I was a kid did a lot of things for me after I lost my father at 6 years old. And so my affinity and my affection towards the Jewish community is way deeper than politics. It is, I was a very young kid who just had a father murdered. And these people who I knew nothing really about outside of stories here and there from my grandparents, just about Jewish people and their participation in the civil rights movement in terms of financing and even some activism. Outside of that, I didn't really have any close relationships as a very young kid. And then that happens. And so for me, I just have a very, very soft spot for Jewish people, for wanting to protect them, because they were there for me in a very confusing time as a very, very young kid. So this is very personal for me.
Yeah.
With that said, I absolutely think the administration is doing the right thing. The onus is on the administration to protect not only just Jewish students, but any college student. Parents are spending a significant amount of money, getting loans after loans, burdening themselves with debt to send their children to some of the best institutions in the world. They should know, when my child goes to Harvard or Columbia or NYU or any school, they're getting a good education. Yep. They're going to be safe. They're going to be protected. Their Jewishness can be out front and center, and it is going to be okay. That's not the reality right now for many of these students across the country. And I stand behind what the administration is doing. I think there's a lot of Jewish students, even during my focus group, that said, I'm not a Republican, but I certainly probably will start voting that way because no one else is trying to protect or defend us. And that says a lot.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the tuition at Harvard. They've got this massive endowment. They take taxpayer money, and they admit, I'm hearing, estimates of about 25% of their student population, foreign students.
1 in 4. Yep.
Yeah. Who pay full tuition, making them financially very valuable to the university. I'm wondering how much that sways things. The commitments they get from the CCP, from Qatar, from other foreign entities, that really bothers me in the sense that if a lot of, we know that not all of these students from China are performing espionage on behalf of their country.
Sure.
But even if 5% of them are, 1% of them are, isn't that too much? Should they be vetted?
One too much. Too much, one too many. Harvard has a $53 billion endowment.
Yes.
80% of that endowment, they can't necessarily move it around easily. There's some restrictions tied to some of it. But in general, in terms of like liquid cash, it's around 9. I literally went over their financials from last year. Yeah. It's about $9 to $16 billion.
That's a lot of money
that they have at their disposal to kind of do whatever they want. I think the expenses were around $9 billion. I'm sure if you were to make some cuts, sort of merge some different departments within themselves, you could probably shrink that a little bit, maybe by $1 billion or $2 billion. The point that I'm trying to make here is there's $3 billion that they're arguing about. Like, oh, Harvard won't thrive in terms of research if this is taken away. Michelle, imagine the number of public institutions who would be grateful for $100 million to go towards research compared to the $3 billion Harvard is getting. Imagine the facilities that they would be able to upgrade and modernize, giving an opportunity to working class children who decide to go to college versus those of the elite. And you're right when you bring up that 24%. As I said, 1 out of 4 students happen to be foreign. Now, granted, many of them are in the grad school. So, Harvard would say, well, they're not undergrad, they're grad students. But I would argue, well, if you were to eliminate some of them, then maybe you could put some of those graduate professors in undergraduate courses to expand the pool of undergraduate students, particularly giving more opportunity to underprivileged individuals. Now, Harvard does a little bit of that, But if you were to get rid of some of the foreign students, they could do a lot more, is the point that I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
And no country, at least not a sensible one, would educate their adversaries, would educate their enemies.
That's
You
a
think the
great,
Chinese
that's such a
would
great
do that,
point.
Michelle? The Chinese wouldn't say, come on, American students, let us educate you at the greatest institution or institutions in China, and then you can go back to America.
Well, they
makes
did
zero
bring
sense.
Tim Walz over with a bunch of his students time and time again, but they educated him in quite a different way. Let's get to the freedom of speech argument here.
Yep.
That if you limit students or you say, look, you can't have, this DEI all over your campus, and they're saying you're trying to dictate what we can and cannot teach. And I would argue that, look, we got rid of affirmative action. By the way, DEI is now DEIB. I don't know if you're aware of that. The B is for belonging. So they're going to keep adding letters, kind of like the LGBT community keeps adding letters to make it more inclusive, until later you're going to find out you've just added everyone in the universe to your little tiny group. But this stuff is divisive. I just last night watched the film Coddling of the American Mind. And I'm, the book by Jonathan Haidt and Greg Lukianoff. It was put into a film with these experiences of kids who came to America and went to our schools and found themselves hamstrung about the things they felt they could say on campus because of either pressure from their professors or their peers. So whose free speech is really at stake here?
I mean, look, I am a conservative and I'm a very limited government guy. And I certainly am not one to advocate for the federal government to intervene unnecessarily,
right,
in terms of dictating the way a private institution governs itself. I've got to be honest. I do think there has to be limitations there. Sure. And I think most conservatives would agree.
I do agree.
With that said, you don't have the right. And again, I'm going to go back to, I mentioned this about the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has ruled on this. Yeah, we're all entitled to free speech, but you're not entitled to speech that leads to violence against other people. We've ruled on this. And Harvard has fomented and fostered an environment where free speech has gone on to, in some instances, physical altercations. It's gone on to bullying. It's gone on to a place where professors in the classrooms are telling students, I don't care about the history, your history. You must write about this particular research paper.
Yeah, compelled speech is not free speech, by the way.
It is not free speech at all. And even on the diversity equity point, I've really been disappointed in this. And I'll tell you why, Michelle. When affirmative action was initially agreed to in our country, particularly among Black Americans and white Americans, the agreement was, look, there's a lot of things we just got wrong. We got to correct this stuff. We recognize that there's some economic differences. We want to help our fellow Americans who happen to be Black. Let us figure this out. And I do believe that was a darn good thing. The problem to me, and I'm going to be honest, Michelle, is that we started extending this to everybody. People who weren't owed anything. LGBT, you get a little bit of something. If you're an immigrant, you get a little bit of something. If you're from China or middle or anywhere else, you get a little bit of something. Or female, you get. And I say, and look, I'm not a white guy here, so I don't know, but I would presume if you're white and you would say, well, look, I can understand why we did this as it pertains to Black people and trying to figure things out. This makes sense. But why in the hell are we extending this to any and everybody from all over the world, all over the country? And the net result has been, and I'm not surprised by this, when people say, you know what, enough of this. We're just going to shut it all down because this was not the original intent. And so, in my opinion, Democrats who love to say, they're the great party for Black progress in particular, they opened the floodgates on this. And I would argue that it has been a negative causation for progress that they appear to say that they advocate for, because they have taken the struggle, historically speaking, of Black people, and they have allowed everybody else to say, well, Black people in the 19th civil rights, well, we too should have the same rights. Or slavery, we too. I mean, you look at the issue with the president wanting to end birthright citizenship. The 14th Amendment, as you probably well know, was about extending citizenship to freed slaves. It was to reverse Dred Scott. But now you have immigrants saying, well, wait a minute, we too, this should apply to us.
Yeah.
When there's no trace history. I mean, Michele, this is insane to me, what we have allowed to occur in our country. And so this is the net result where we currently are. Free speech is important. But again, you do not have the right. You do not have any right in this country to utilize your speech in a way that is antagonistic, that leads to violence against another. The courts have been clear on this. Right. And Harvard, producing some really talented attorneys, you would think, Michele, would probably know that better than anybody else.
One would think. But then again, I was at the Harvard bookstore about a year ago, and they had this sign inside their bookstore on this big table of displayed books. The sign said, "We sell banned books." It's like, well, then they're not banned if you can sell them.
If you're selling,
you got to be smarter than that, Harvard. Okay,
I like the irony in that.
Yeah. Democrats are also right now, they are trying to reach the men that they lost. And whether it's Latino men, white men, black men, they are trying to find, and they're throwing money at this, Shermichael, because that's what they do with every problem. They figure if we throw money at it, we'll find the issue. The Joe Rogans of the world, these podcasts that have grown so exponentially and have attracted these audiences, are totally organic. Yep. No one manufactured this. TNT, the NBA on TNT is the best sports show on television because it just happens. Nobody said, let's test Shaq. Let's see if he gets along with Kenny the Jet. No, let's not. Let's see how they all just these four personalities are great. Ernie lets them be, and you got the greatest chemistry alive. So these things aren't forced. What are the Democrats thinking?
$20 million is getting ready to go down the drain, in my opinion.
Down the drain.
Megyn Kelly talks about this often. I'm sure you know Megyn well. Yeah. She always talks about authenticity. Right. And the problem with not just the mainstream media, I'll sort of include them into this in my assessment here to your analysis to your question. They too have an authenticity problem. It's why the ratings are in the trash. It's why advertising dollars are way down. It's media has now become democratized. It's why you have a show. I'm doing my thing. So many other folks are sort of doing their own thing, given an opportunity to the consumer to go listen to multiple voices about different perspectives that they enjoy. Now, this is what I would call democracy at play, where versus having 4 or 5 legacy entities controlling every little thing and presenting narratives the way they see it. And I said this on CNN Tuesday, and I need to post this clip. I said, no one likes or trusts the media because you guys lie, because you guys say that you're objective when you're not. Most people know that most individuals in the press are liberal leaning. Most of them know that they vote for Democrats. I said, so at a minimum, hell, at the bottom of the show, say, look, I'm a Democrat, but I'm going to try to present the news as best as I can. At least give me, the viewer, the opportunity to say, yeah, I don't want to listen to this.
Yeah.
Versus lying to my eyes, said, oh, I'm objective. I'm going to give you the truth and the facts with no bias. And then the moment you start to present the news, I say, okay, here comes the bias. Let me turn the channel. The $20 million that Democrats are going to spend is not going to work because they don't seem to understand what men are yearning for. And most men, I would argue, most of my circle group, whether it's my black friends, my white guy friends, hell, my Latino friends, even some of my Asian buddies that I know, they all, even those who lean sort of more Democratic than some of the others, they would all say that they view the Democratic Party as being too feminine.
Yeah.
They view the Democratic Party as not being a place that's representative for men. They don't speak to men. They don't speak to the language of men on a plethora of cultural, social issues. They have adopted views that men would say is antagonistic to the idea of masculinity and the survivability of masculinity. The notion of being tough, of being strong, of being stoic, of being fearless. Those are all traditionally adapted men sort of character traits. Now, that's not to say, as Harvey Mansfield wrote in his book titled Manliness, that you don't have some women who may be sort of tougher, like a Margaret Thatcher, if you will.
Yeah.
Right? There are some strong, courageous women out there.
Damn, yeah.
But for the most part, these are character traits that are associated with men. And men are saying we want to preserve those things. We do play a particular role in society in terms of protecting the family, defending the society, in terms of raising children the right way. Not only just boys, because often we say, well, boys need good role models. They do. But guess what, Michelle? Women need to also, daughters need to know how to be loved, how to be respected, how to be treated. So they're not going out there meeting some clown and getting pregnant when they shouldn't be pregnant. And so guys are saying we want to preserve those things. The Democrats say, well, women can do it all. They can do it all by themselves. And I think most men would say we don't view it that way. That's their problem. And $20 million is not going to help create a Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan was at this for 20 years. Ben Shapiro, when he created Daily Wire a decade ago, it takes time to build these things. You mentioned TNT, Stephen A. Smith. All of these guys, they've been at this for years and years and years. And now they're shining. And I salute every last one of those gentlemen because they've put in a lot of work.
You and I both know how much work this takes.
It takes a lot of work.
It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of your time. We don't just sit here and chat and throw it out there. There's a lot that goes into what we do.
It is.
And so I'm with you. I think
$20 million isn't going to work. That's my point. It's not going to help them at all.
I would take the 20 million if they want.
I'll take the 20 million too. They want to call Shermichael. Give me a call.
Yeah. But what you just said though reminds me of when Justin Trudeau would constantly, like, he'd wear a t-shirt that said the future is feminine. And it's like, why? I mean, can it be both masculine and feminine? Why are you pushing this femininity? And the other day, it's just within the last few weeks, Hillary Clinton is asked, what advice would you give the first female president? And she said, don't be a handmaiden to the patriarchy.
I saw that.
I mean, so first of all, you're telling women sort of to shun men on the one hand, and you're also conveying to men that we don't need you, we don't want you. And we think you're just patriarchal and that all you want is power. And I can tell you from my upbringing with a Latino father, by the way, who had his little share of machismo, with an older brother, with my husband, with the people that I know, the men that I know in my life have all championed me. They've all helped me. They've supported me. They've loved me. They've protected me. And I have my way of doing all those things in return for every man in my life. So I don't understand this division and this, women now want to give birth by having the ecto uterus so they don't have to carry the baby. That would make us more like men. Why can't you just accept that being a woman is pretty damn great?
I got to tell you something that's great. My wife and I just had our first child.
Oh,
she's 4 months now.
congratulations.
Thank you. And I've been thinking about the process, and I write a lot, and I was just writing about watching my wife over the course of the 9 months and watching it once my daughter was born and even the birthing process. I just thought, Jesus Christ, there's no way in the world we as men, I don't even want to know what that pain level feels like. Michelle, I think we die from a heart attack if we ever had to imagine that level of pain. But just watching God bless us with being able to have a child, watching the child come out of the womb, watching my wife, there's just something that it's almost indescribable. You can only say, but God, only the Lord could have ordained this. And there's something as a man that when that happens to you, you fundamentally change. I told a friend this last night. I said, there are two types of men that I don't trust in terms of brotherhood. A guy who decides not to get married, a man who decides not to have children. Every man wants to have a continuation of their legacy. It's natural in us. We want something to carry on. And the marriage part is something my grandfather taught me. It fundamentally forces a young man, which my grandfather would say is still a boy, to become a man. Because now you have a responsibility that usurps just you. It's not just about you anymore.
Right.
There is a protective instinct that comes in, one, when you get married, because this is your wife. She is going to give you that support, the love. She's going to help give you the family that you so desire. So one, you have to absolutely protect her. And then once you're blessed with a child, then that's a whole nother level psychologically, I think, for most good men, of saying, okay, I have to fundamentally change the way I view the world. I have to become more disciplined. I have to become a better example. not only to my wife of what a good man should be, but to my child, because I want my child, whether it's a boy or a girl, to see a healthy family, to see their father worshiping and treating their mother right, supporting their mother in every way, shape, or form, because I want my child to be able to know to expect the best when they form and bond their own partnerships. And so for me to dismiss the importance of that organic structure is to really lead towards the erasure of a healthy society.
I agree.
You cannot have a healthy society without a nuclear family. And this isn't about religion if you're not a religious person. Just study nature as in terms of human beings, that is. We need to congregate together to build stronger generations for the human species to continue on. Why would you object to that? And that's not to say that women can't be strong. My wife is getting ready to go get an MBA from an Ivy League school. This is while just having a child. Yeah. And I have been so supportive of her. Hey, whatever you need, I am here. You need to study, leave me with the daughter. If I got to go run some errands, I'm bringing my crying baby with me, which Michelle, Jesus, I don't know how you all do it. It is not easy.
No,
it is not easy at all.
It's not. And I do admire single moms who are in that position, who do it on their own. I don't envy them at all. But there are some tough mamas out there who have to do it and who do it. But yeah, I would say, to the fathers,
we matter. And to your point, you need that healthy dose of masculinity in the home for discipline and structure is important. That's what men really do bring. But you also need the empathy that comes from the mom. You cannot have one without the other. Yeah. And every good man out there will tell you there's so much value in their wives. And Michelle, I don't know if I'm looking at my own trajectory now at 34 and the amount of success I've had more recently and the happiness. I wouldn't be in this place if God didn't bless me with my wife. Yeah. I can say that with 100% certainty. Yeah. And when my grandfather and my stepdad would say these things to me as I was getting older, I would just say, okay, whatever, why you got to get married? Maybe you can have fun as a guy. You get married whenever you want. A lot of guys, you go through that phase.
Sure.
But once you grow out of that, you realize, wow, granddad was right. Dad was correct. This is necessary more for me than I actually realized. There's not a good man out there who wouldn't agree with me. And there's not a good man out there who would say he wouldn't do anything to protect his wife or his family. And so if you're a Democrat, why would you be against that? Why wouldn't you want to say to our young boys, our young girls, you need a father? Because for our young boys, we want you to know how to treat your wife, your girlfriends. And for our young ladies, we want you to know how you should be treated.
Do you think there are some Democrats, I want to be fair, that do think that way? I think there are. I think the extreme left is, throws caution to the wind, and everything can be however you want it to be. You can identify however you want. You can be, men can have babies, all the rest. But you're sitting on a set at CNN with a variety of views, ideologues. Yeah. So please tell me that some of them agree with you on this.
There are some who do agree, and there are some who do not agree at all. I would say, and I don't know if we'll get into this in our discussion, but I think it's why you look at the Latino community, Donald Trump received a little over 40%. I think it's why when you look at black men in particular, not nationally, but in individual states like Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Texas, the president increased his leads in each of those states over 10 points.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking 18 points, I believe, in North Carolina. It's like 20 something points in Texas. I mean, these are significant numbers among non-traditional groups of color who voted conservative. In part, I think a lot of it had to do with economics, but I also think a lot of it had to do with social issues, where people are saying, look, we're not against if you're an adult and you choose to identify with whatever you want. I may not agree with it. I may not get it. But when it comes to our babies, we're going to protect our children. Yes. We're going to have some standards for our children. Now, when you become grown, as my grandfather used to say, you go do whatever the hell you want to do, because that's going to be on you when you didn't listen to what the instructions were when we tried to rear you to do the right thing. That's up to you. But we got to protect our children. And I think a lot of communities of color, to your question about are there some people out there saying, well, this is a bridge too far. Like we want to have a sensible customs of behavior and norms and standards in our society. And to demand or to want to preserve those things, Michelle, isn't to be against anyone. I'm not against anybody being who they say they want to be or identify. I'm not against that. but I am against not wanting to preserve things that I think are foundational to a healthy society. If that's the way I would put it.
It's been such a sudden change, particularly with the gender ideology.
Yeah.
And we can trace it to social media. We can trace it to COVID when kids were stuck with their devices. We can trace it to these things. To a certain extent, the toothpaste is out of the tube, but I do think where we can have some change is when we see some of these. I had Chloe Cole, the detransitioning, young woman, on my podcast last week. She thinks it's going to take lawsuits against these doctors who told her parents, look, if you don't get her breast cut off, she's going to kill herself. I don't know how, as a doctor, you can predict, unless someone tells you, I will kill myself if I don't, that line of threat to a parent is, to me, if I have a child who's threatening suicide, the last thing I want to do is mutilate their body. The first thing I want to do is get them in counseling. So how do you think this is going to turn? And then we can also get into the trans women playing in women's sports and girls sports.
I don't think it's going to end well. My grandmother has a PhD in childhood psychological development. She spent 40 years in education, and she's a Democrat, but she's, traditional, old school, older Black woman from the South. So she's pretty conservative in a lot of ways, as many Black people from the South typically are, particularly on cultural issues. And she just said, I think we're opening Pandora's box in a bad way. She said the psychology on this, in terms of how the child's mind develops, there is no research that suggests that they know with 100% accuracy that this is who they want to be. And she said, once upon a time, the standard was, as it pertains to this issue, we need to just wait and see. We're going to counsel. And when they get 18, perhaps the development really sort of goes in a different direction. And if that's the decision they want to make, then you should support that decision if that's what they choose as a young adult. But when they're 5, 6, 10, 12, 13, there is
15,
no
even
research.
15 in the throes of their hormonal change, and they don't know what the hell they're thinking.
That the brain is in a position to make a determinative factor that this is what they want for the rest of their lives. And I think it's just sad when I see many of these parents who I do believe, Michelle, want to do the right thing for their child. If some doctor is saying your child's going to kill themselves if you don't do this, there's not a parent in the world who would say, well, I'm going to do whatever because I don't want to lose no parent wants to lose their child.
No.
And so I agree with your previous guest that I think it is going to take lawsuits against some of those doctors. And I think you're going to have the American Psychological Association have to come back into this and say, look, we need to redefine the standards here as it pertains to children on this particular issue, because we cannot continue to allow doctors to have parents agreeing to the mutilation of their children. And what happens when the child reaches a certain point and says, well, I don't really want to do this anymore. Or maybe the child says, hey, if it's a woman, I'm a lesbian, or if it's a boy, I am gay, but I don't want to be the other gender.
Yeah.
But you've already made the changes where it's too late.
Yes. And that has happened, and we've seen it happen, and it is too late because so much of this is irreversible. Yeah. These young women who were 15 when they did this, and now they're wondering, will I ever be able to have a child? Think about that. When you're 15 or under, you're not even, that's such a small fraction of the life you're gonna have.
Yeah.
And to decide in that very beginning part of your life that you, I was born in the wrong body or whatever. Let's talk this through. Let's wait and see.
I agree with you 100%, Michelle. Let's wait and see. But we can't continue to do this because you're taking away any ability to have autonomy as this child becomes a younger person into a young adult. And again, that we're seeing more and more instances of people who are saying, well, I don't think I really wanted to do this, or there was some sort of social pressures, or I saw certain things where I thought this was what I wanted, and I didn't really want this. And again, there are adults who are transgendered, and they have made that decision on their own. And I've even seen, Michelle, transgendered adults say, I really do think you kind of need to make this decision once you're older, because there's a lot of complexities that go into this. There are transgendered individuals who have stated this on the record. And so if even individuals who have identified with this particular group are saying this is complicated, you should support the child and let them figure this out. but don't move immediately to the hormonal treatment and to the surgeries, because what if they do change their mind? There is no going back.
There's no going back. It's quite something. Hey, I
This is a
don't
tough
want
one.
to let you get away without talking about the Second Amendment.
And
'Cause
that's something I love.
I know, and I want to know how you came to have the passion for the Second Amendment that you do. What you would, and I shouldn't ask multiple questions at once. So how did you become so pro Second Amendment?
Growing up in the South, started hunting when I was maybe 6 years old with my grandfather. Got my first Winchester rifle, 22 LR 22 long rifle. So that's a really, really easy round to shoot when you're first trying to teach a kid. Not a lot of recoil. And we would go out into the country where the family still owned land in Louisiana, and we would go hunting squirrels. The easy thing you can hunt with a 22 LR. And I was like, wow, this is cool. And my grandfather said all the boys need to learn how to shoot. And then, with my grandparents growing up in the South, there was also a historic component with blacks having to defend themselves against the Ku Klux Klan needing firearms. And so my grandfather always taught us there is a historic purpose that you need to value this tradition, but you also need, as a guy, to defend yourself, to defend your family. It's a right that should never be taken away. I can tell you from experience, when that right is taken away, we have seen what happens when you can't defend yourself. And so for me, it is a right that I think should be preserved for every American. I would say no matter what you look like, where you're from, rich or poor, if you are an American, you should take advantage of your right to defend yourself against a tyrannical government. And people say, well, that will never happen. I always hear Democrats say that will never happen. And I say, well, what do you think happened in the South just 5 decades ago, 6 decades ago? Many tyrannical governments in the South wanted to remove the rights to defend yourselves. And it was oftentimes a lot of advocates of the Second Amendment who happen to be Republicans just saying, well, wait a minute here. These black people need the right to defend themselves against these types of tyrannical individuals. And so that's why it's an important issue to me. I love shooting. So started hunting, got into competitive shooting, did that for a really, really long time. Started 2 businesses in the gun space that are doing really, really well. One that's done documentaries for SIG and Daniel Defense and some of the big manufacturers in our country. Then our new company, Guns Out Network, which owns something we just titled called We the Free. It's a streaming platform that specializes in firearms and action-oriented content and really, really geared towards men. But we're also now building gun content for women because a lot of women are buying guns now. And so I tell your audience, go check us out, wethefree.com. If you're into firearms, you want to know more about firearms, and that's a space for you. But the Second Amendment to me, Michele, is as tethered to the First Amendment as any other amendment can be. You really can't preserve any of our rights without free speech and without the right and ability to defend said free speech.
And I want to get to that second part because, and the Democrats who say, oh, we're never going to have a tyrannical government here in the United States. And yet right now they're accusing us of having a tyrannical government in the United States. But anyway, that's another story. They will also say, well, how does me having a gun, how can I prevent the U.S. military from attacking my neighborhood? See, they go to that place. And I wonder what your response to them is.
The most extreme, first of all, if we ever had a president in this country that attempted to use the U.S. National Guard or the armed forces and law enforcement against Americans, I don't foresee, like, this isn't Cuba. This isn't China. Our ethos as a people is very disparate from those other folks. Like, we are a warrior society. I would always say in 5,000 years, if America went away and people were reading about us, I think historians would say those people were warrior people. That is just who we are. We are fighters. and we're not going to listen to a government or anybody else for that matter to turn us against our own people. So one, I think that's a ludicrous fringe argument. Number two, if we did have people in the military who did listen to such a person, so should we just kowtow and bend the knee and say, okay, well, we're just going to do whatever you want us to do? Or should we say, hell no, we're going to fight to preserve our rights, to preserve our freedoms, which, again, going back to my argument about our ethos being a warrior society, we are fighters, Michele. Other societies don't really have that in them the way we do. We had to fight for our freedoms against the Britons. We know this more uniquely than anybody else. And so when Democrats make that argument, I say, one, it's unlikely to happen because most of those people that you're talking about love freedom. These people wear a uniform to die to protect freedoms for people that they would never know, for people who often, like you all, who underappreciate the fact that they wear this uniform to fight for freedoms in foreign lands, for some of the ridiculous things that you guys advocate for in this country, things they may disagree with. They still put on that uniform to go die for it.
Yeah.
Because that's how valuable and how precious freedom is to them. So one, it's unlikely. But two, if it ever were in that iota of an opportunity that it could happen, I want the people in this country to be able to fight like hell to the last person standing to say, we're not going to go for this.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's really well said. I could talk to you for hours, Shermichael, and hopefully we'll do it again.
Well, can you have me back? I'd love to come back. I mean, we got to talk about the economy. I want to talk about trade. I want to talk about the shifting landscape in terms of the political dynamics. The Republican Party is starting to become more representative of working class. You got to have me back.
Okay, it's a date. We'll book it. We'll book it. Maybe around Independence Day. Maybe that would be appropriate.
Hey, let's do that. I think that would be a great opportunity.
All right. Awesome. We will be in touch. I end my podcast every time by saying, be brave, do good. He's a great example of this. Shermichael Singleton, congratulations on the baby. Congratulations on all the success with your businesses and television, and keep going, man.
God has been good. I'm humbled and I'm grateful because I recognize that nothing is guaranteed and nothing is owed to anyone. And so I'm just reveling in the opportunity that God has given. And the Bible says, knock and it shall be open unto thee. And I'm knocking and he's opening the doors. And as long as he keeps open, I'm going to keep walking through.
Well said. Folks,
thanks, Michele.
We will see you next time. Hey, you can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.